Tom Granger stood at the back of the small white chapel in Ashland Pines, Oregon, feeling like a stranger at his own son's funeral. The late afternoon light filtered through the stained glass windows, casting fractured rainbows across the empty pews. Maybe 20 people had shown up, mostly acquaintances, two of Meredith's co-workers and his sister Jenny. No neighbors, no friends from Wesley's school, just silence wrapped in suffocating politeness. At the front, Meredith moved like a seasoned event planner, not a grieving mother. Her black dress clung perfectly to her form, not a hair out of place, and her makeup was untouched by tears. She directed guests with a soft voice and controlled smile, thanking them for attending with the same tone she used when confirming a dentist appointment. There were no flowers. Wesley didn't like attention she had insisted 3 days ago. He wouldn't want all that fuss. But Tom remembered the opposite, how Wesley used to pick bright yellow dandelions from their yard every spring, holding them out in tiny fists with a proud grin, teeth still crooked and gap-toothed. His hands clenched at his sides. Meredith appeared beside him, her voice low, almost rehearsed. "The service is starting. You should come sit down." Tom followed her to the front row, every step weighed down by dread. The casket, small, white sealed, rested at the altar. He had never seen his son's body. Not once. Meredith had made all the decisions while he was away at a university conference in San Francisco. By the time he returned, everything had been handled. The pastor, a thin man Tom didn't recognize, began speaking. "We gather today not to mourn, but to celebrate a life well lived. A life well lived." Wesley had been 6. Tom's jaw tightened. There were no stories, no personal memories, just generalities about children being God's gifts and heaven's gain. The pastor mispronounced Wesley's middle name. Meredith didn't flinch. When the sermon ended, guests offered handshakes and sympathetic nods. Their words slid past Tom's ears like static. Jenny approached him near the chapel doors. Her eyes, red rims, scanned his face. "You look like hell," she said. "I feel worse. When's the burial?" Tom hesitated. "There isn't one." Meredith wanted cremation. Jenny frowned. "That doesn't sound like you." "It's not." "Then why? Time to go." Meredith interjected, materializing between them. Her smile was cool, efficient. "The crematory's waiting." "Already?" Jenny asked. "It's been, 20 minutes?" "Delays only make things harder," Meredith replied, slipping her arm through Tom's. "Closure is best handled quickly." Jenny's expression darkened, but she said nothing as Meredith led Tom away. At the crematory, Meredith signed the forms while Tom stood in the hallway, hands trembling. Through a small glass window, he caught a glimpse of the casket sliding into the steel chamber. It disappeared without fanfare, without pause, without him ever saying goodbye. Meredith emerged moments later holding a polished urn the size of a shoebox. "It's done," she said. "We can start healing now." Tom didn't answer. 3 weeks later, he submitted his resignation letter to Oregon State University. His department head called twice. He didn't pick up. Instead, he cleaned out the garage and filled it with tools, his father's old planer, a set of chisel stacks of reclaimed oak. He sanded wood until his hands blistered. He drilled and glued, shaping reality into something solid, something he could control. On a Tuesday morning, Meredith appeared in the doorway of the garage, carefully stepping over sawdust in designer heels. "You can't hide in here forever," she said. "I'm not hiding. I'm working. On what shelves? Furniture." "Tom, you're a professor." "Not anymore." She perched on the edge of his workbench, her skirt perfectly arranged. "I've been seeing someone, a therapist, Dr. Remy Vaughn. He specializes in grief processing." He didn't look up from the plank he was measuring. "Good for you. He thinks you should come too." "No." "Tom," I said, "no." The edge in his voice made her flinch just slightly. "You deal with this your way," he said. "I'll deal with it mine. By building furniture, by doing something real." Her face hardened. "Wesley is dead. Hiding won't bring him back." The measuring tape snapped closed in his hand with a sharp crack. He met her eyes for the first time that morning. "I'm not the one hiding." That night, Tom sat in Wesley's room. The bed was still made. Baseball cards lay scattered on the desk. A Lego spaceship stood half-built on the carpet. The air smelled faintly of grape-scented markers and little boy sweat. Everything was as it had been, frozen. Meredith stood in the doorway. "We should pack this up." "No, it's not healthy, don't." She took a step in, then stopped. When he turned to face her, "You cremated our son before I could see him. You planned his funeral like a business lunch. You say you're grieving, but you haven't shed a tear. Don't lecture me about healthy." She said nothing. "I'm starting to pay attention," Tom added, "and something's not right." Her composure cracked just for a moment, but that was enough. And Tom knew whatever this was, it wasn't over. Tom's hands moved over the sanded oak surface, smoothing the grain like muscle memory. It was the third time he'd rebuilt the same shelf. He didn't care. The pattern of the work kept his thoughts from spiraling, measure-cut plain fit. Wood didn't lie. It didn't smile while hiding secrets or say things like, "Closure is healing." Behind him, the door creaked open. "You've been out here all morning," Meredith said, her heels clacking lightly against the concrete floor. Her perfume filled the space before she did something expensive and floral, too pristine for the smell of sawdust and linseed oil. Tom kept his back to her. "It's my workshop. It's our garage," she corrected with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "And you've barely been inside in weeks. Don't you think it's time I am inside? Inside myself, doing something useful. Building bookshelves doesn't bring Wesley back." Tom turned slowly. "Neither did cremating him behind my back." Her smile twitched. "We talked about that." "No," he said. "You talked. I came home from San Francisco to a sealed urn and a closed file. You made all the decisions. You were in no condition to be his father," he snapped. Silence fell. Meredith stepped away from the bench, her arms crossing delicately. "I'm seeing a grief counselor. His name is Dr. Remy Vaughn. He's different, grounded. He says healing begins when we stop resisting reality. Sounds like he bills by the metaphor. He thinks you should come. I think you should leave." Her mouth tightened. "You're being hostile." "No," he said. "I'm being awake." That night, Tom avoided the bedroom. He sat in Wesley's room instead, surrounded by memories that still smelled real. He sat cross-legged on the floor, one hand on the pile of worn baseball cards, the other resting on the edge of a nightstand Wesley had once called my treasure drawer. Outside, the wind pushed against the windows. Inside, the air stayed still. It was just past midnight when Tom finally stood up and walked into the hallway. Meredith was already in bed, the soft glow of her phone lighting her face. She didn't look up as he passed. The next afternoon, Tom drove out to Pine Grove Cemetery. The sky was overcast, the clouds of the color of wet concrete. Wesley's headstone was simple gray granite, no inscription beyond his name, birth, and death. Meredith had vetoed anything more sentimental. He knelt, brushing away a few leaves, and placed 3 dandelions at the base. Weeds, Meredith had called them. But Wesley had loved them. "They're tough, Dad," he'd once said. "They grow even through concrete." Tom looked around. The cemetery was nearly empty, just him and a groundskeeper pushing a rake near the oaks 50 yards away. He exhaled, closed his eyes, and spoke softly. "Hey, buddy, Mom's still seeing that therapist. Says he's helping her process things. But she doesn't seem broken. Not like I do. She hasn't cried. Not once, boss." The breeze shifted, and with it came a whisper, leaves fluttering. "Dad." The voice was small, familiar, and real. Tom's eyes snapped open. He turned. 20 feet away, a boy stood near a large gravestone half hidden behind it. Small frame, messy brown hair, a blue zip-up jacket, Wesley's jacket, the one with the stitched dinosaur patch on the shoulder. The boy stared at him for a moment, unmoving. Then he bolted. "Wait," Tom shouted, scrambling to his feet. He ran after the child, but the boy was quick, darting between tombstones, weaving through trees. Tom lost sight of him near the maintenance shed. He circled it twice. Nothing. Not a trace. The groundskeeper looked up from raking. "You okay, sir?" Tom's chest heaved. "Did you see a kid? About 6, blue jacket?" The man shook his head. "No kids out here today. Just you." Back at home, Tom didn't speak during dinner. Meredith didn't notice. She scrolled through her phone while eating a kale salad. Later that night, long after she'd fallen asleep, Tom went into his office and pulled out the folder Meredith had handed him after the funeral. He hadn't really looked at it until now. Just paperwork. At the time, it had felt like too much to bear. He flipped through the pages: police report, cremation authorization, death certificate, signed by Dr. Brandon Keller. Tom frowned. He didn't know the name. The incident report claimed Wesley died at Forest Park in Portland. Meredith's statement said they were hiking when Wesley ran ahead, slipped, and fell down a ravine. By the time emergency services arrived, he was already gone. The injuries were too severe for viewing. Immediate cremation was strongly recommended. Tom stared at the signature again. Dr. Brandon Keller. He opened his laptop and searched. The official website for Multnomah County's medical examiner listed no one by that name. Tom picked up his phone and made a call. It took 3 transfers before someone answered. "I'm looking for information on Dr. Brandon Keller," he said. "He signed a death certificate last month." The woman on the line hesitated. "Keller hasn't worked with us in 2 years. He's in private practice now." Tom's grip tightened. Then why was he signing off on my son's death? That's highly unusual, the woman said. Hold on, let me check. He waited. A minute passed, then another. Sir, she returned, the certificate exists in our system, but it's flagged as external. Keller was listed as a consulting trauma specialist. Specialist in what, I'm sorry, she said. I can't share more without proper authorization. Tom hung up. The boy in the graveyard, the sealed casket, a death certificate signed by someone who shouldn't have had access. His chest pounded like a drum, and the quiet, deadly suspicion that had first taken root at the funeral began to bloom. Something was very, very wrong. At 3:11 a.m., Tom sat alone in his dimly lit home office, the glow of the laptop screen casting pale shadows across a table cluttered with documents. The only sound in the house was the soft hum of the refrigerator down the hall and the erratic thump of his own heartbeat. His cursor blinked on the search bar where he'd just typed Dr. Brandon Keller, Portland, Oregon, trauma specialist. The results came fast, too fast. Most were generic. A LinkedIn profile, a defunct website, one Yelp review for the Vail Institute, a private facility nestled near Tillamook Forest. Tom clicked. The Vail Institute described itself as a trauma and family transition center offering discreet, transformative mental health services for high-net-worth families. Dr. Keller was listed as medical director. No credentials were visible, no affiliations with Multnomah County or any hospital system. His pulse spiked. A sick feeling settled in his gut. He scrolled further and froze when he spotted another name in the site's testimonials, Remy Vaughn, LMFT. Dr. Keller's guidance helped my most complex cases resolve with clarity and compassion. Remy Vaughn, Meredith's therapist. Tom stood up too fast and nearly knocked over the chair. He turned to the filing cabinet in the corner and pulled out an old business card, Zadai Monroe, child psychologist. She'd seen Wesley the previous spring when he was having separation anxiety. Tom dialed. Voicemail. He hung up, then dialed again. On the third ring, a groggy voice answered. Dr. Monroe. Zadai, it's Tom Granger. I'm sorry for the hour, but I need to talk to you now. A long pause. Tom, what's going on? It's about Wesley and Meredith and the man who signed my son's death certificate, Dr. Brandon Keller. I think something's wrong. Really wrong. Okay, she said, instantly more alert. Come to my office first thing in the morning. Before the sun rose, Tom was parked outside a small brick office complex in downtown Ashland Pines. The street was quiet, the windows still dark. But inside Zadai Monroe's office was softly lit with the scent of lavender and the quiet hum of a white noise machine. I was sorry to hear about Wesley, she said as Tom took a seat across from her. How are you holding up? Not well, he replied. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Of course. Did you ever have concerns about Meredith's relationship with Wesley? Zadai's expression shifted. Not surprise, not confusion, more like recognition. She folded her hands. Yes, she said finally. I filed a report with Child Protective Services about 10 months ago. Tom's breath caught. What kind of report? Wesley had started expressing subtle but consistent fears. He didn't describe physical abuse, but there were signs of emotional manipulation. Meredith would guilt him for crying and ignore him when he was upset and punish him for needing attention. It was classic coercive control. And you never told me. I tried, she said gently. I called your house 3 times and left voicemails. Meredith called me back and said the family would no longer be needing services. She claimed you both agreed I was overstepping. Tom stared at the floor. She never told me, I figured. So I filed the report anyway, but it was dismissed. Dismissed by who? Zadai turned to her filing cabinet and pulled out a folder. I keep copies of every report I've filed. She flipped through it and tapped a line with her pen. Case was reviewed by external consultant Dr. Brandon Keller. Tom's blood ran cold. You're telling me the same man who dismissed a CPS report about Meredith manipulating my son is the one who signed his death certificate? Zadai nodded slowly. Tom leaned forward. I need your help. Can you pull everything you have, records, timestamps, anything that connects Meredith to Keller or Vaughn? I can, she said. But what are you planning to do? Find out the truth, he said. Whatever it takes. That afternoon, Tom called his sister. Jenny Granger was a logistics analyst who spent her days tracing complicated shipping chains and finding missing inventory in global warehouses. If anyone could follow a trail of lies buried in bureaucracy, it was her. She arrived at his house with a laptop, a mug of black coffee, and a no-nonsense scowl. Show me what you've got. Tom laid out the folder, death certificate, police statement, cremation forms, insurance paperwork. Jenny scanned them with clinical focus. Okay, she said after 20 minutes. This is Hinky. Hinky. Look here. The death certificate was issued Thursday morning, but the cremation authorization was signed Wednesday evening. That's out of order. What does that mean? It means Meredith authorized cremation before Wesley was officially declared dead by the state. Tom rubbed his face. Jesus. Jenny kept typing. Dr. Brandon Keller is licensed in Oregon, but his practice is strictly private, no hospital affiliations. He's registered as the medical director of the Vail Institute. Guess who's listed as co-founder? She turned her screen. Remy Vaughn, LMFT. Tom stared at the glowing names on the screen as dread took root in his chest. They're working together, he whispered. Jenny clicked to a bank statement Tom had found tucked in Meredith's filing cabinet, a $60,000 wire transfer dated 1 week after Wesley's death. To the Vail Institute, Jenny confirmed. Memo line says continuing care. Care for who, Tom said. Wesley's supposed to be dead. Jenny's eyes met his. You don't spend $60K for grief counseling. No, Tom said, voice low. You spend it to keep someone hidden. Tom parked his truck a half-mile from the pin on his GPS map, heart pounding in his chest like a war drum. The gravel road ahead vanished into dense forest, no mailbox, no house number, just a faded metal gate with a rusted chain and a hand-painted no trespassing sign swinging in the wind. The GPS tracker hidden in Meredith's car had pinged here twice in the past week, but this time she stayed for over 2 hours. She'd told him she was going to therapy. Tom hadn't called her out. He'd simply waited watching her dot on the app drift west of Ashland Pines deeper into the Tillamook forest. Now flashlight in hand, he ducked beneath the chain and crept down the overgrown drive. It was nearly midnight. The forest swallowed sound. The only thing louder than his breath was the soft crunch of twigs under his boots. 10 minutes later, the trees parted and a house appeared, if it could be called that. It was massive, modern, steel and glass with cold corporate edges, a long wraparound deck, high windows, no curtains, spotlights at each corner like a research compound masquerading as a luxury lodge. There were 2 vehicles in the driveway, Meredith's silver sedan and a black SUV with darkened windows. Tom slipped through the tree line, keeping low. He crept to the back where a basement window had been cracked open an inch for ventilation. He crouched beside it, heart hammering, and listened. Silence. Then a hum, soft and steady like industrial air filtration. He pulled gloves from his coat pocket and slid the window wider. The smell hit him first antiseptic and something sterile chemical. He squeezed through the opening and dropped silently into a dim basement hallway. Inside, it didn't feel like a home. It felt like a hospital. The floor was polished concrete. The walls were painted a blank cold gray. On one side, an examination room's steel table drawers labeled with medication codes, a crash cart. On the other, a glass cabinet filled with psychiatric drugs, some of which he recognized from old case studies, haloperidol, lorazepam, risperidone, powerful sedatives. His stomach turned. A clipboard lay on the counter, a dosing chart labeled Patient M6. No full name, just initials. Age 6, dosage increased over 3 weeks. The medications were flagged for behavioral stabilization and memory suppression protocol. Tom took photos of everything, his phone silent but shaking in his hand. He moved deeper into the basement. Another room contained a bed bolted to the floor lined with soft restraints, a child's size. The next hallway led to a locked door with a keycard reader. He backed away, pulse racing. No security, no alarms. They didn't think anyone would come looking. He found the stairwell and crept up, emerging into an open-concept kitchen and living area. Everything was spotless, minimalist, cold, no family photos, no clutter, not a home and institution. Then he saw movement. Through the second-story window across the great room and up a short stairway, a child appeared. Tom froze. The boy pressed his face to the glass, peering out into the trees. He was small, pale, wearing a faded blue jacket with a dinosaur patch on the shoulder. Wesley. Tom's legs nearly gave out. He pressed a hand to the wall to steady himself. His son was alive. Not just imagined in a graveyard. Not just a whisper in his grief. Alive. Right here. He moved to the staircase, every step deliberate. Up the hall. Past locked doors. Then one with a narrow glass window. Through it, a small room. Child-sized bed. Toys arranged too neatly. Drawings taped to the wall like they'd been staged. And Wesley curled under a blanket, his chest rising and falling with shallow breath. Tom tried the handle. Locked. He leaned close to the glass. Wesley, he whispered. Buddy, it's Dad. The boy stirred but didn't wake. A voice downstairs froze him in place. His dosage still isn't holding, Remy. Vaughn said, voice clinical. He remembers too much. I told you he was resistant, Meredith replied coldly. What now? We increased the haloperidol to 5 milligrams daily. Add the experimental suppressant from the pharma trial. Will that hurt him? Remy scoffed. Define hurt. It'll erase the memories. He'll stop asking for his father, stop dreaming, stop resisting. And Tom, there was a pause. He's grieving. Grief makes people irrational. He's not a threat. He's asking questions, Meredith said. What if he finds us? Then we arrange an accident, car crash, suicide note. Grieving father loses his mind. It happens all the time. Tom's vision blurred with rage. His fists clenched so tight he felt his nails break skin. He pulled out his phone and hit record. The voices continued, cold, methodical, planning to destroy his son's mind, planning to kill him if he got too close. Then he made a mistake. A floorboard beneath him gave a sharp squeak. What was that? Meredith's voice sharp. Check upstairs. Remy barked. Tom backed away, heart racing. He ran down the stairs through the kitchen toward the basement. Shouts behind him. Footsteps. He dove through the basement window just as floodlights flared to life. He hit the dirt and kept crawling. Didn't stop until he was back in the trees, lungs heaving, chest burning, the recording still running on his phone. Inside, it was all there. Every word, every threat, every lie. His son was alive, and he was going to burn their world down to get him back. Tom stood in the aisle of a small electronics store on the edge of Ashland Pines, his jaw tight, as he examined a line of nanny cams disguised as children's toys. He picked up a soft brown teddy bear with button eyes and a stitched smile, holding it gently, then flipped the tag over. 1080p, motion activated, manipulated, wireless. Hidden lens in the left eye. Perfect. He paid in Washidash and left without speaking to the clerk. Back in his garage, Tom tore open the stitching at the bear's neck and checked the device again. Angle battery signal, strength. He paired the camera to his phone, then ran a field test. The image came through clearly grainy in low light, but sound was sharp. That night, he sat at his workbench with Jenny, showing her the recording from his escape, the one where Remy and Meredith casually discussed memory-erasing drugs like they were ordering lattes. Jenny's face paled. Jesus, Tom. This is conspiracy-level criminal. Like federal. He's in that house. He's alive, Jenny. And if they find out you know, she asked, her voice low. I don't care, Tom said. They'll never hurt him again. Jenny reached across the table and grabbed his wrist. Then we need to do this right. That bear, it has to be your wiretap. You plant it, we monitor it, you build the case. And when it's airtight, we go to the cops. Tom nodded, fingers trembling, as he sewed the bear back together. 2 nights later, under a new moon, Tom returned to the forest. He parked farther out this time and walked in complete darkness, the path etched into his memory now. When he reached the house, it looked the same, cold and indifferent under a sky full of stars. The basement window was still cracked. No alarms, no cameras visible. He slipped inside. The layout was unchanged, silent, antiseptic. He climbed the stairs, crept past the kitchen, and up to the hallway of locked doors. One of them, Wesley's, was slightly ajar. Tom stepped inside. The boy was awake this time, sitting cross-legged on his bed, face pale under the overhead nightlight, eyes unfocused like he was somewhere between waking and sleep. Tom knelt beside him. Wesley, he whispered, voice catching in his throat. It's me. It's Dad. The boy blinked slow and heavy like underwater. Dad. Tears threatened to choke him, but Tom kept his voice steady. Yeah, buddy, I'm here. I've been looking everywhere for you. Mom said, you didn't want me. No, Tom said, swallowing the lump in his throat. She lied. I never stopped wanting you. Never stopped loving you. Wesley's lower lip quivered. She said I was broken. You were not broken, Tom said, placing the bear gently on the nightstand. You're perfect, and I'm going to get you out of here. But I need your help. The boy nodded, sluggish. This bear, it's special. I need you to keep it with you. If anyone asks where it came from, tell them you found it in the closet. Okay. Wesley reached out and hugged the bear like it was a lifeline. Okay. Tom kissed his forehead, then slipped back into the hallway, shutting the door softly behind him. Every step on the way out felt like a thunderclap in the silence. He made it to the window and vanished into the trees again. The next 2 days were agony. Tom didn't sleep. He barely ate. He sat in his garage, eyes fixed on the live feed from the bear's camera, earbuds and notebook in hand. He captured hours of conversations, nurses administering medication, Remy reviewing dosage charts, Meredith giving instructions like a cold executive. But it wasn't until Tuesday morning that the real breakthrough came. "Can I go home now?" Wesley's voice faint but clear. "I told you," Meredith said. "You are home. I miss Dad. Your dad doesn't live there anymore." He moved away. "You need to stop asking. But I remember our treehouse. And pancakes. And those aren't real," she snapped. "Those are dreams. I don't like the medicine. You'll get more if you keep talking like that." The next day, Remy spoke with Keller in the hallway outside the room, clear audio. "We need to increase suppression," Remy said. "He's retaining too many emotional memories. That's where the resistance is coming from. And the father, we keep gaslighting him. Make him look unstable if he goes to the police. They'll never believe him." Tom sat in stunned silence, the earbuds buzzing in his ears. He hit save on the recording, then called Jenny, then called Zadai. An hour later, they met with Detective Carla Arrington at a diner on the outskirts of Portland. She listened to the tapes without saying a word, her jaw clenched tight. "This is enough," she said, finally. "Child endangerment, medical fraud, unlawful imprisonment. Hell, we could tack on psychological torture." When Tom asked, "Tonight," she said, standing already dialing her phone, "we're going to bring your boy home." Tom couldn't sit still. He paced the length of his living room, stepping around shadows cast by a single lamp. His phone sat on the coffee table, face up the screen, dark silent. Each second crawled. The raid was underway, he knew that much. Detective Arrington had texted 20 minutes ago. "Going in now. Stay by your phone." He checked the time again. 3:07 a.m. Outside, the night was still and frozen. The wind stirred the trees in short, sharp breaths. Inside, Tom's pulse raced like it was trying to escape his body. He glanced at the front door for the 10th time, half expecting it to burst open. Meredith's words echoed in his mind. "We'll arrange an accident. Car crash, suicide note." He rubbed his eyes. He'd locked every door, pulled every shade. Jenny was camped out in the driveway and her car engine running just in case. Zadiah was on standby at the Children's Hospital in Portland. Still, he couldn't breathe. Then his phone rang. He snatched it up. "Detective Arrington." He answered before the second ring. "Yes, we got him." Tom didn't speak. "He's safe," she continued, her voice suddenly gentle. "He's groggy but responsive. They had him sedated. Not enough to knock him out. Enough to dull everything." "Is he hurt?" "No signs of physical abuse. But psychologically?" She sighed. "We're taking him to Children's Hospital now for a full evaluation." "You can meet us there." Tom dropped into the nearest chair as his knees gave out. For the first time in months, he cried without shame, without resistance. Relief poured through him like a broken dam. He drove through the empty streets of Ashland Pines on muscle memory, headlights cutting through fog. At the hospital, security buzzed him through and a nurse led him to room 314. Outside the door stood Detective Arrington with arms crossed, eyes weary but proud. "They didn't resist," she said. Meredith was arrested inside the house. Remy tried to argue. Keller was already halfway out the back, but the team got him. "They're all in custody." Tom nodded, unable to speak. "Wesley's inside. He's sedated but stable." He pushed the door open. The light was low, sterile. Machines hummed softly. And there, curled under a hospital blanket, a V taped to his arm, was Wesley. Paler, thinner, but his son. Tom stepped forward and gently sat on the edge of the bed. Wesley stirred, then blinked. "Dad," Tom smiled through tears. "I'm here, buddy. I'm right here. Can I go home now?" Tom took his hand. "Yeah," he whispered. "We're going home." The next 48 hours were a blur of blood tests, evaluations, and tearful reunions. Jenny visited. Zadiah consulted with the hospital's psychiatric team, Dr. Wad. Sarah Chone, the attending child psychiatrist, pulled Tom aside after a long second day. "He's resilient," she said. "More than most. But this was deep-rooted trauma. Chemical, emotional, psychological. He's going to need time. And stability. Lots of it." "He'll have it," Tom promised. "He mentioned something to me," she added. "Said he thought you were dead." Tom's jaw clenched. "She told him I didn't want him anymore." Chun nodded gently. "That kind of psychological fracture, it takes years to rebuild trust. But the fact that he remembers you, remembers good things, that's powerful. That's what will bring him back to center." Tom looked through the glass into the room where Wesley was gently dozing with the bear tucked under his chin. "That bear saved him," he whispered. Meredith was booked at Portland City Jail before sunrise. Arrington later described the arrest. "She didn't flinch," the detective said. "No yelling, no crying. Just this smug little tilt of her chin like we were interrupting a dinner reservation. And Vaughn, Tom asked, came out with his hands up. But when we cuffed him, he looked at me and said, "You people have no idea what's best for children." Arrington rolled her eyes. I nearly broke his jaw. Keller, unsurprisingly, had lawyered up instantly. He's going to try to pin the blame on everyone else, she added. He'll fold fast once he realizes we have audio financial records and motive stacked 10 stories high. Tom nodded. Good. But even as justice worked its way through paperwork and handcuffs, Tom knew the real work had just begun. Wesley would have to relearn what love felt like, what safety meant, what truth looked like after months of manipulation. But Tom would be there for every second of it. The next night, Tom sat beside his son's bed as Wesley colored on a tray with hospital crayons. His drawings were fragmented, part house, part treehouse, a son with a face that looked a little like Tom's. Do you remember when we built the fort in the backyard? Tom asked softly. Wesley nodded. You let me use the big hammer. I was nervous the whole time. I wasn't, Wesley said, smiling faintly. Tom chuckled. I know you weren't. A moment passed. Are we safe now? Wesley asked suddenly. Tom looked into his son's eyes, still clouded by confusion, but brighter than before. Yeah, buddy, he said. We're safe now. The courtroom was quiet, too quiet. Tom sat at the prosecution's table in a stiff gray suit, hands folded, heart racing. Across the aisle, Meredith wore navy blue, her blonde hair pinned back in a soft twist, her face carefully composed into the picture of wounded motherhood. A gold cross necklace rested against her collarbone like a prop. She hadn't looked at Tom once. Remy Vaughn sat next to her, flanked by his own high-priced attorney. He looked thinner, grayer, but still smug, the kind of man who believed in his own righteousness no matter the damage. And at the back of the room, in a secure holding space for witnesses, 7-year-old Wesley waited behind a private screen supervised by Dr. Sarah Chun and a court-appointed child advocate. The jury consisted of 8 women and 4 men, most of them parents, grandparents, normal people dragged into an unimaginable story. State Prosecutor Angela Rodriguez stood at the center of the room, her tone calm but lethal. This case, she began, is about a boy who was stolen not from his home but from his mind. Wesley Granger was told his father was dead. He was sedated, lied to, hidden from the world. Not because he was sick, but because the people who claimed to love him wanted control. She turned and gestured toward Tom. This is Thomas Granger, Wesley's father. For 6 months, he mourned a child who wasn't dead. He buried a son who was still alive. He was made to doubt his sanity, his reality, by his own wife and her accomplices. Tom felt eyes settle on him, but he kept his gaze fixed forward. He wasn't here to be seen. He was here to see justice done. The defense tried to paint a different picture. Meredith's attorney stood soft-spoken, paternal. Mrs. Granger was manipulated by a man she trusted, Dr. Vaughn. She was told that her husband, Mr. Granger, exhibited signs of emotional instability, that Wesley was developing oppositional behavior, that psychiatric intervention was the only way to ensure the child's future well-being. He gestured subtly toward Tom. You will hear recordings, yes, but context matters. Were these the actions of a mother trying to hurt her child, or a mother desperately following the guidance of trained professionals? Tom clenched his jaw. Context. That was their whole defense. When he took the stand, the courtroom held its breath. He told them everything methodically, without embellishment. From the funeral without a body, to the forged certificate, the fake therapist, the GPS tracker, the recordings, the bear. Every word a nail in the coffin of their lies. When Rodriguez asked him, Mr. Granger, do you believe your wife acted in Wesley's best interest? He didn't hesitate. No, because no mother in the world buries her child alive. Meredith looked down at her hands. Vaughn's attorney tried to rattle him on cross. Isn't it true, Mr. Granger, that you broke into private property? Yes, that you placed unauthorized surveillance equipment in a minor's room. Yes, that you are not a licensed psychologist nor trained in pediatric mental health. I'm trained in fatherhood, Tom said calmly, and it doesn't take a license to recognize cruelty. The jury leaned in. But the real turning point came when Wesley testified. Because of his age and trauma history, the judge allowed his testimony via closed-circuit television. The screen descended above the jury box, and when Wesley's image appeared seated at a small table with a teddy bear in his lap, the courtroom fell silent. Rodriguez's voice softened. Wesley, do you remember your father? Wesley nodded. He built me a treehouse. He makes pancakes with too much syrup. He always checked for monsters under my bed, even if I told him they weren't real. Did your mom tell you he was gone? She said he didn't love me anymore, that I was too much trouble. Tom's breath caught in his throat. Did you believe her? Wesley hesitated, then nodded, at first. But I kept remembering stuff. Good stuff. Like camping and Saturday cartoons, and how he always waited for me at the bus stop. I didn't want to forget. Rodriguez nodded. And how do you feel now? The boy looked straight into the camera. Safe. Even some jurors wiped tears from their eyes. After that, it was over. The defense tried to cast doubt, called Remy to the stand, but he cracked under pressure. Rodriguez played the full recording where he discussed erasing memories, and he stammered until the judge asked him to stop. Dr. Keller never took the stand. His lawyer cut a plea deal that morning, 5 years probation in exchange for full cooperation and permanent surrender of his medical license. The jury deliberated less than 4 hours. Guilty, on all counts. Meredith was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Vaughn got 25. The judge said their crimes weaponized psychology in a way that redefined cruelty. Tom stepped out of the courthouse into crisp Oregon air, holding Wesley's hand. Reporters shouted questions, but he didn't answer. Wesley looked up at him. Is it really over? Tom bent down. Almost. But we're free now, and that's the beginning. 2 years later, the house in Silverton, Oregon, sat at the edge of a wide, sloping hill where wind moved smooth through the trees like a slow song. A swing hung from the old oak in the backyard. A new dog, Wesley, named him Dandelion, chased a squirrel across the grass. Inside the woodshop, sawdust danced in golden beams of light. Tom Granger stood at the table, sanding down the edges of a dining room bench. His hands were strong again, calloused and steady. Not out of numbness anymore, but from purpose. The bench wasn't for him. It was for the main room at the Granger Foundation, the facility he'd built from the ashes of the Vail Institute. Where sedatives and silence had once ruled, now children learned to speak, again play, again trust again. The process had taken months of legal wrangling. The $2 million settlement from the life insurance company paid to avoid the PR disaster of a resurrected child found alive had bought the building outright. With the help of Zedai Jenny and even Detective Arrington, Tom repurposed every sterile hallway, every cold white room. Now there were art classes, therapy dogs, kitchen smells. Life. Wesley's idea. He'd walked through the halls one day and said, "This place should smell like pancakes, not bleach." Tom had laughed until he cried. That morning, Wesley came home from school carrying a permission slip and a backpack full of textbooks. "Mrs. Dunley says you should come to career day," he said, tossing his bag on the couch. "Oh yeah," Tom asked, wiping his hands on a rag. "She said I could introduce you." Tom raised a brow. "And what would you say I do?" Wesley shrugged, grinning. "You build stuff, and you don't give up when things are hard." Tom smiled. "That's not a bad job title." That night, after dinner and homework, they sat on the porch as the sun dipped behind the trees. The silence between them wasn't strained like it used to be. It was peaceful now, earned. "Do you ever think about her?" Wesley asked, suddenly, his voice quieter than the breeze. Tom didn't answer right away. He watched the sky change color. "Sometimes." "Do you miss her?" "I miss the person I thought she was," Tom said, "but not the one she became." Wesley was quiet, his legs swinging from the bench. "Are you mad at her?" Tom exhaled through his nose. "Not anymore." "Why not?" "Because anger's heavy, Wes. You carry it long enough and it starts to feel like who you are. I didn't want that." Wesley nodded slowly, thinking it over. "She scared me sometimes," he said. "But I think maybe she thought she was doing the right thing, like in her own messed up way." Tom put an arm around his shoulders. "Maybe, but even when people think they're doing good, they still have to answer for what they did." "Yeah," a beat passed. "You burned the letter, didn't you?" Wesley asked. Tom turned to him, surprised. "How'd you know about that?" Jenny told me. Tom smirked. "She really needs to work on boundaries." Wesley smiled just a little. "What did it say?" Tom hesitated. "She asked for forgiveness. Said she was sick, not in her mind, but in her spirit." "Are you ever going to forgive her?" Tom looked out across the yard. "I forgave her the day I stopped letting her live in my head. But I'll never forget, and I'll never let her near you again." Wesley nodded. "Good." A few days later, the Granger Foundation held its first spring open house. The sun was out, the therapy garden in full bloom, and the dandelion patch that Wesley had planted with his own hands stood tall near the entry gate. A new plaque had been installed beneath the flagpole. It read, "You don't bury pain, you confront it, burn it to ash, and grow something better from the ground it once poisoned." Inside, families toured the facility. Counselors gave demonstrations. children painted in the sunshine. And in the main therapy room, Tom stood by the bench he'd just delivered, watching as a young boy and his mother sat down to color together. This was what healing looked like. Sam. That night, Tom and Wesley sat again on the porch just like always. The wind was soft, the world was quiet. "Hey, Dad," Wesley said, kicking his feet slowly. "Yeah, buddy, I'm glad you came for me." Tom didn't speak at first. He stared ahead, blinking against tears that no longer came as often. "I would have searched forever," he said. Wesley leaned against his side. "You didn't have to. I always knew you'd find me." Tom looked down at him, stunned. How Wesley grinned. "Because you always check for monsters, even when I said they weren't real." Tom laughed quietly, pulling him in close. And for the first time in years, there were no shadows behind them. Only light, only truth, only love.